Hey everyone, welcome to today's Ambience meeting. I see there's a couple of agenda added by Keith. I think those are great topics. So let's go ahead get started. Keith, you want to discuss the integration test? Let me start screen sharing.
Sure. You wait for the screen share to pop up.
Okay, I
Are
got
you
it.
are you sharing, Lynn, or you want me to share? Oh,
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm sharing. Yeah, you can discuss.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Um, so I was thinking through our the state of ambient for the 1.2 release, and then I remember we had this issue open from a while ago um, that I worked on for a little bit in the context of the peer authentication integration tests. Um, and that issue was around being able to verify and validate NTLS in some of our integration tests. And without that ability, there are several integration tests that were never written. In peer authentication was actually one of those integration tests. So I just remember this issue. Do we have? There was some discussion earlier this year, but kind of on the eve, we're like what 2 weeks, 3 weeks away from the 1.22 release. Did we ever? Do we have a way to fix this? Do we have an alternative to this? Where are we?
Yeah, Ian, do you want to chime in? I think we have an alternative way to test. Ian, if you're talking, you're muted.
Oh, hey, sorry. I was multitasking. What's the question regarding the tests?
Okay. Well, so remember the mutual TLS testing you worked on trying to figure out, I think this is the
Oh,
latest
right.
status, right? So you basically testing, we're doing strict edgebone and maybe have some network policy to enforce. It's on strict edgebone, so I'll let you speak.
Yeah, that was one idea. John also had a PR. I think it's still pending in zTunnel that would allow us to like sort of query the zTunnel for some of that metadata. Do you remember if that merged yet, John?
It didn't merge. So at the time, it was also not great because it only applied to inbound, not outbound. Now it could work on outbound. I probably have to go update it, but we just made some changes to the connection tracking, so now it knows both. There's a few options. There's like 4 options, I think. Well, maybe more. We can do the metadata server thing. That's okay. I would love to have a better way to do it with like a sock option and do the whole eBPF thing, but that's probably pretty hard. So we'd have to get someone to sign up to do that. We could also query access logs from zTunnel. We now have access logs, and they include that information. So I'm working on improving some of the zTunnels integration tests, like the ones that run in zTunnel all on its own, and I'm utilizing looking at access logs for some things. That's mostly as like a double check because in zTunnel code, obviously we have more introspection available, but it's a possibility. You could do the same with metrics, but metrics kind of suck because they increment, so you don't have as fine-grained there. There was one more. Oh, the connection tracking. We now have like an Easter cuddle command and debug interface on zTunnel to dump out the current connections, which is actually similar to the metadata server. It's kind of just a different target. The target audience is admins debugging zTunnel, not applications querying themselves. But in our case, it doesn't really matter for the tests. The downside is the connections have to be active. But, well, in the metadata server lookup, they also have to be active. But the way that worked in the tests was we actually put the code to do the metadata lookup in the Echo server itself. And so it was a lot easier to do that. So yeah, that's the current state at least. I don't know. The easiest solution would be to do the access logs, I think. I don't mind doing the metadata server. I would love to do the sock option thing, but that's hard. So
Yeah, it sounds like access logs, now that we've got that added, is probably the most straightforward. Um,
Do we consider this a release blocker for 122?
I don't think adding better tests is a release blocker unless we. I mean, I don't think it's a release blocker. Basically, I'd be happy to have better tests, but. Or you mean the
Yeah, this-
ability to query? Like what is it the test, the ability to query and test, or the ability to query as a user?
Yeah, let me clarify. I think my line of thinking is, and I don't have an answer yet, but I think my line of thinking is, what tests are we precluded from writing because we can't check for MTLS enforcement? And do those test gaps present to a release blocker? Because in theory, we've got unit tests for everything, which are good. I guess I'm not trying to make a policy either way. I'm trying to see what other folks think, and what we've done like prior art within Istio.
Yeah, I mean it's like actually this issue exists in sidecars with TCP as well. So it's like you can indirectly test that MTLS is used by doing things like having policy checks, mismatches in the assertions there. So like our test coverage is at like a B plus, I would say, which B stands for beta. So I think that's good enough. But yeah, obviously I'd love to improve this. But I don't think it's a blocking lack of test coverage.
Yeah. On the bright side, I mean, it's manually tested as the part of our get started guide, which is the first page people would use Ambient. I assume we don't have any testing on the metrics too, like the metrics emitted by ztunnel. I think it also have mutual TLS in there.
We have metrics tests.
So
Yeah.
okay, so at least that tests the mutual TLS. And
Yeah, so we know that
too,
we have a
right?
variety of tests that do assertions that say that there's MTLS. What's missing is we have, I believe it's one or maybe a few specific tests that do like every single combination of every possible request ever. And in there, we would like to be able to say that, these ones should all have MTLS and these ones all shouldn't. And today we can't do that. So it's not like we have no test coverage of MTLS. We just don't have the total comprehensive coverage on all of the tests, basically. There's all sorts of ways we indirectly test it. Like if MTLS was broken maybe in some tiny obscure way, we wouldn't catch it. But in any way that I can think of, like a test would fail. It might not fail in a nice way. That's like this isolated incident of here to here should have had MTLS and it didn't, but it would definitely fail.
Yeah, the only thing I
Okay.
can think of would be like the port exclusion or port exceptions for pure auth. But outside of that, I think most other things would be caught.
So the port, which I think Ian's test would kick in, right? Because if I remember correctly, Ian, in your test, you make sure like the traffic is using the edgephone port. So if any of the traffic are not using the edgephone port, they should fail the network policy.
I'd have to double check, but I think in the review of that, it was decided that that wasn't particularly useful, and we did not end up adding it. And in
I
part,
see.
that was because it had a hard CNI requirement that we didn't want in the base integration tests. And also it was fairly indirect. So we could think about adding that to the ambient post test, which uses Calico. But that solution, I don't think, is going to be part of the regular integration tests.
Okay, yeah, I thought this was the test that's doing that, but maybe not.
Oh, it looks like it's being skipped, right?
Yeah, that must be that's the thing. Yeah, if we enable this, I think that would help address your concern on the ports if it's a skip on the non-H-bone port.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't love it, obviously, but I do agree that from both a manual testing perspective, unit testing perspective, we're pretty much covered for NTLS. And I take the point that it's no worse than what we're doing with TCP, if I understand what you're saying correctly, John. So I'm fine with the state of things 122, but I think there should be something to prioritize for 123, and I think it's probably a stability blocker from ambient to reach, free ambient to reach stable. But for now, I don't have any concerns.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. Does anyone disagree with what Keith was mentioning? All right. If I don't see any objection, a lot of thumbs up. So let's go ahead, move to the next topic. Is on the layer 7 go or no go for beta for the next release.
Sure. And if, by the way, if folks have other topics, feel free to preempt me or like add them to the agenda. I just happen to put some thoughts I had in the agenda, so feel free to hop in at any time. But for this one, I remember we discussed, I think last week and then previously, in steering that a couple weeks out from the release, you wanted to make a go no go decision on layer 7 from TOC, and if we're going to try to include that in the 122 release based on what has to be done. Last week, there were some questions from a couple of TOC members around who didn't know that there was the L7 potentially in scope for 122. There are some questions around the status of the design doc for waypoint enablement and such. I don't know if there's been any TOC discussion out of band, but do we have any more clarity on this? Because I think this week it would be the time for that go no go decision for L7.
Yeah, I just pinned Louis to see if he can join the meeting. So my understanding is that he was going to talk to Mitch, which unfortunately I think is on vacation this week, to see, and Eric to see if there's any concerns for approval. Eric, since you are on the line, do you have any thoughts or objections from your side?
Yeah, I didn't think I had any objections when I looked at it.
Okay, so it sounds like
I'll have Louis maybe give us an update later on today if he can. But if you guys have any objections, Keith or Justin or anybody, I think now it's a good time to discuss too.
yeah, I don't have any objections other than kind of the process piece that Justin raised last week. I think the design is sound and it's good for a beta. I think my main goal in getting clarification on the go no go is that allows us to be able to prep comms, to create some excitement. We do have some decisions to make from a steering perspective around how we want to message ambient beta, because there is a lot of even I think there was a CNCF post that was out for KubeCon Europe that was kind of hedging a little bit. We want to make some decisions around that based on the engineering questions behind or the engineering question of is L7 ready for beta in 122. And what I think I've gathered both from COC and people here, and also just looking at the issues, I think we're there. I think we're on the go side, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've been actually personally doing some testing myself too. I get the get started guide updated. I've actually been pretty happy with how simple L7 is compared with before, like the service account based waypoint. I think now it's much more user friendly. The only thing I would say, that's a little bit less intuitive is just the implicit automatically allow waypoint. That I don't think it's enabled by default. That maybe needs a little bit more thinking, but that doesn't change like the API for the two labels we added. Use waypoint and waypoint 4. That's something to help user to do things a little bit more convenient or automatically. John, did you want to weigh in a little bit too?
No, not really. I just thought I'm on the go side. I had started writing up a doc on like exactly what is in beta and what's not. I didn't get a chance to clean it up and share it out, but I plan to do so soon. Which I can give you a brief summary. It's basically what is not included is multi-cluster, DNS proxying, sidecar interop, IPv6, dual stack, SOCKS 5, multi-network, egress gateway, VMs, alternative metrics, logs, CA providers, sandwiching, running non-Istio gateways, and customizations to the gateway. That's what's not supported. So what is supported is you can install, you can use L4, you get metrics, access logs, authorization policies, certificates. We only support the in-pod redirection mode, not the old way. You can deploy waypoint. There's the Istio commands. Istio commands are like outside of the beta decision. They have their own life cycle of experimental under the X or not. But there's a variety of commands that exist. To deploy the waypoint and troubleshoot and whatnot, you don't need to use it though. And then, the annotations or labels around use waypoint and redirection and whatnot. And just emphasizing, we'll only say single cluster, no coexistence with sidecars. So. Certificates aspect, only Istio-D certs. Yeah, today we only support the Istio CSR GRBC API. Technically, I suppose you could run something else that speaks that, but we don't have like the full integration. I think you can also use Istio-D as an RA with that API. I'm not super familiar with all the options, but like there's no Spire integration or like reading from files or some of the other ones.
Cert manager, those sorts of things.
And those aren't just like experimental, like they just are not implemented in any way. So
probably worth a call out for folks if they've got requirements, for example, saying that you can't have any, there's several folks who say, oh, you can't have an in-cluster issue for your certs, then 122 Ambient's not going to be okay for you.
Yeah, there's a good amount of people that 122 Ambient's not going to be good for. Like actually most Istio users who aren't willing to go from scratch because we're not supporting interop. Or big users because they use multi-cluster, right? So yeah, there are a variety of callouts, definitely. Yeah, Justin?
So do we have, I mean, just generally around documentation, do we plan to call out who we think it's used for or useful for? And also, do we have sufficient documentation, or is this going to be sort of more of a soft release and we're not going to like widely publicize its use? Because it feels like there's a lot of support that's probably missing if we're going to launch this thing shortly.
Yeah, well, I'm not really leading the docs, but in my vision was that we would have like all the other features would just say like it's beta. Like we can't just say Ambient's beta because Ambient is almost like its own service mesh that has it's
Right.
like all these sub features, right? So I want to be pretty clear about what is and isn't beta. And for the most part, like almost all the stuff that's alpha or all the stuff I listed as not supported is either off by default and you have to explicitly opt in with an environment variable, or it's just it doesn't even exist, so you couldn't possibly use it. So we should make it clear in the docs, but it's also, I think there's less ambiguity in accidentally using alpha features relative to Istio sidecars historically.
But and what about just the documentation generally about like onboarding and all of that?
Like who it's targeted for?
Yeah.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, I
reasonable.
think we should also have like say something around scale as well, like who's the target audience for a beta, right? It's people who are, we're saying that it's usable in production, but not that any random person can just go YOLO deploy to prod and they won't have any issues, right? It's usable for people that are okay with a little bit of pain.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a truly beta thing that Istio sometimes, we've been said, no, yeah, this is good. Go ahead and run it, even though it says beta. This actually is actually beta.
Yeah. I don't know the best. Like, realistically, we can put whatever in the docs, and like we'll still get people that do either one think it's like it's totally experimental garbage because it says beta, or think it's totally solid production ready and get mad at us. No matter what. But it's still useful to have it there. So like there will be some people that read it.
John, I want to confirm. So you said, and I completely agree that experimental features will be off. But we had a discussion about multi-network, multi-cluster. I see there is an option somewhere in values. Those are not stable or beta or anything. I mean, they're experimental and should not be turned on. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the one exception is that we don't currently have a way to turn off multi-cluster support specifically for Ambient, other than, I mean, you have to opt into multi-cluster by deploying secrets, but it's not like you then also flip another flag that says enable Ambient multi-cluster. So we could add that potentially if we want to.
So what happens if you deploy a secret? You get cluster local behaving like in Istio?
You would get, yes. Yeah.
So basically that will prevent enabling Ambient by default and all the other stuff. Because you can
Ambient beta implies that you don't have multi-cluster.
Okay. So it implies, okay, I see. So basically,
it's not the most explicit. Like someone could reasonably accidentally go deploy a cluster and not read that Ambient multi-cluster is not beta and start using multi-cluster with Ambient, and it mostly works, but we claim it's alpha. So we could add another flag that they have to explicitly opt in. We just haven't done that.
If Ambient is disable, no, this one is separate flag. Yeah, right. Good way. I mean, do you think it's useful to be safe?
I'm fine either way. The only reason I thought about doing it a few times, and the thing that gave me a bit of pause was I just didn't know how to expose that to the user. That like you're creating secrets, but we're ignoring them. That was my only worry. And it's like I don't know that we can reasonably just turn off the Ambient part. It's almost like you'd have to turn off all of multi-cluster entirely, and then. Well, I don't know. It just felt a little hairy. If someone wants to go do it, like I'm not actually against it, but once I realized that it was going to be more than like a 30-minute job, I kind of didn't feel compelled to do it.
I was thinking just in the discover WDS to just not return the other clusters, not necessarily disable multi-cluster. completely, but just filter out the result.
Well, the secret stuff is in the. It's a separate controller, right? Like there's a separate controller for multi-cluster.
Yeah, and it it's and but the endpoint in the model, the endpoint knows in which cluster it is, and when you return results to a zTunnel, you have the list and you know which cluster it is. Everyone. Anyway, I think because it's very risky and we risk to get into the same situation where it ossifies and people expect it, and we already know what happens.
Well, we will be very clear on doc for this. I think probably most people would onboard in single cluster first. I mean, it would be really, really adventurous user. But again, there's no objection if anybody wants to send a PR for that. By the way, some of the contents you guys are discussing, we'll have to figure out whether it makes sense to be in the docs or whether it makes sense to be in the blog when we announce beta for Ambient. It might make more sense just to be in the blog because, you know, for the next release, you know, it might be different or maybe both. So we'll have to decide. But I do agree, we definitely need to communicate the beta content, what's in, what's not, and what is who is the target audience scenario for beta.
One related question: is there any draft or that can be reviewed? And second, do we make distinctions between things that are part of the contract and things that are part of the implementation? I mean, we discussed that, you know, different components can be swapped, and there are some contracts that are defined and they're important for, you know, interop and other things. Is there any way to mark down, hey, this is a contract, this is an implementation somewhere?
I think for this release, there is we don't need to do that yet because we're not publishing the contract yet. Out of the list that John said, other gateways, I think that's what you're talking about, Costin. Like other gateways, for example, is not supported. And so in the absence of a contract, it's all implementation until we create said contract.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to say, like, I agree with what Keith said, but also it's not like the contract is an afterthought that we're then going to like not be able to do because we didn't think about it. Like we've been doing it all along. We're just not saying it's beta. And that type of documentation is probably more developer facing in anyways. Suspect, maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, and the Costin, to your point, there will be docs to review, right, for sure. I mean, John has already he just mentioned he's already write a doc and he will share that soon. And all the doc or blog will be as PR for everybody to review before merge too.
My last question, do we have anything about the peer identity, MDS or whatever? I mean, or just we don't support it?
It is not implemented in any way.
So we don't plan to?
I mean, I want to.
For this release, I mean.
Oh, for this release? No, I think it's too late.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, those are all the right questions. I appreciate you asking them, Costin. I think my point, to go back to the original question about whether this is doc versus blog, I think it needs to, like John put in the chat, needs to be both. I think this is a good opportunity for us to try to actually use the feature status table on the docs for Ambient at least, and track things as they graduate. I don't know. I'm not saying I want to be prescriptive about the kind of machinery, but I think that getting the practice of using something like that will be good.
Yeah, I was thinking we'd have a whole new section for Ambient, and then we can have each of the things I said would be basically a row. At one point I had a PR to do that. I don't think I sent it because then I didn't know what I wanted in each criteria at that point. But I can send that up, and maybe that's a thing that we all review instead of a doc. I don't know. I'll figure something out and talk with folks.
And speaking of the docs that we're talking about, I think it's probably good to know what is the date, the cutoff. Because I know, like in my mind, I know the release is somewhere in the next 2 weeks. What's the cutoff for docs, blogs, tables, those sorts of things for 122?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the basic doc on how to use things needs to be in when the release goes out, along with the blog, right? Like what you guys are discussing, how do we, what's in, what's not in, and who is going to use this on what scenarios, and the basic user guide needs to be in. Get started is already updated, so. I think the architecture needs to be updated. We could potentially add additional docs after the release, would be maybe like operating, troubleshooting, debugging tips, those type of things. But I think like the basic doc has to be there along with the release. And I think Keith, you also signed up, maybe write something for a release channel or something, that I do envision those needs to be available when the release goes out in 2 weeks.
I guess my
Yes.
question is like the day of the release, do we have more formal timelines in that, or I'm trying to look for the 122 wiki link, but just didn't know if we had any more specific dates for those or deadlines for those sorts of things.
Yeah, John, you want to weigh in?
I was actually going to ask my own question, but I can, I guess, weigh in.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
sorry.
technically, we cut the docs over at like the whatever the day of is. We do the branch cut. So from a technical standpoint, I think there's basically like the day of, or maybe the day before or something. From getting everything prepared, I would not want to do it the last day. Probably the sooner the better. Like we can always add more docs later, even after we ship. There's some set of like critical docs that are kind of must-haves in my mind. So what I was going to ask though, which maybe goes further to this, I haven't been to work on any docs at all. I know a lot of people have. Thanks. Is there help needed on the docs from me or others?
Probably. Yeah, probably. So just to show everybody, by the way, I've been actually looking at the doc, try to updating them. So you guys probably all know we did promote this and the Get Started is updated. So do check it out because the waypoint experience has been changed, which I think is simplified a lot. I think the test, I thought it was enabled, but it works manually. But Eric pointed out that there was an error in enable it. I think this is still outstanding issue in the test. Installation guide, I think the Helm guide is pretty good. I think I've run through a pass of it. We do need help from somebody to write the guide for Istio install with Istio. I would say that would be very nice to have, but we probably are not going to block the release because we already teach people how to install Istio in the Get Started and also in the regular Istio install. And the Helm guide is pretty good. The upgrade guide, this guide is also pretty current as far as I know. There's one caveat on GKE, and I mean, this guide we're just going to update as people submit the PR when they're running into different environments, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. The upgrade guide I've run through one time. It's a little bit harder to test this, but it's pretty straightforward. So I don't think it needs much work. What's going to need most of the work, I think, is the user guide. We do need to take a pass updating layers 4. I do think some of those are no longer valid. Layer 7 needs to be finished. We had an intern working on it, but I'd say we probably just want to start from scratch. This Z-tunnel traffic redirection, I think it needs to be updated somewhat too. So the architecture, I'm trying to see if Louis can help, but maybe John, if you have time, could potentially use some help on there or anybody else. So that's about it. I mean, we're actually not too far on these docs. Once we finish the architecture and the user guides. And then the other thing is the blog. We do need to write an announcement blog about Ambient goes to beta. So we could potentially start working on that maybe like a week before the release date, because I think a week to write the blog and review probably will be sufficient time. So we do have like 2 weeks, right? May 13, yeah.
I have a question about this. I mean, I think this is fine for the launch, but the way that Ambient is listed here is a little bit odd, and it's, you know, because it's, you know, up above you have setup, and so that's sidecars, and then it has like tasks, and then it's sort of like, and here's Ambient. Like, it doesn't feel very integrated.
That
and
is
so-
true. Yeah, we've kind of gone back and forth on this. I think the ideal way is probably integrate into the rest of the Istio doc, but that's much more effort. And
Yeah.
then the other ideal way is maybe do a ambient.istio.io, which is another big chunk of work, and we're not sure if we have bandwidth to do it. Probably not for 1.2.22, but maybe for future release.
Yeah, and my feedback has mostly to do with, I mean, I think this is fine for now because it is actually sort of a tacked on thing, but I think longer term, we need something that's a little bit more integrated, so it's not a separate, you know, I think we really want this to be a native option. So that was really, I'm not looking to create more work for the 1.22. I just think longer term, we should think about making it more, you know, a part of the project and not a separate thing.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, I think depends on our preference. I almost feel it might be nice just to be ambient.istio.io if we can, because if we integrate with Sidecar and the search and everything, you know, could be very confusing, right? If people wants to do enable mutual TLS and we show them like 3 ways to do things, and then they might be navigate in between Sidecar and Ambient Doc, I think it can be extremely confusing. Keith, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I was going to say that I this gets a little bit into the next topic that I have, but I personally am a big fan of having Ambient elevated, and it's just a personal preference. I'm not a huge fan of our docs because I think that I don't like the organization and the taxonomy of how things are split up. I don't have I will freely admit I don't have a good alternative yet. I'm chewing on it in my brain, but I think that I don't think that the docs currently, as they stand, not for Ambient but just in general, don't necessarily reflect how people want to use or experience Istio today. And one of the things that the themes or the tasks or initiatives for 123, Istio 123, that I'd like to suggest would be to take another look at the taxonomy of our docs, and see, you know, think about the user experience, think about where Istio users are, think about the new users that we have when it comes to Ambient. Because the opposite, look at the mirror of your point, Justin, is that there are a lot of users who are going to start Istio using Ambient and don't want any of the other junk, put it in quotes, because their use cases are never going to use it. So we also want to make sure that we are meeting those users as well and not overloading them with too many choices throughout the documentation. Again, this is one person's opinion. Several folks probably disagree with me. That's fine. But I think that the point that you get at, Justin, is a good one, because but I think it speaks less about Ambient specifically where it lives and more about the general experience of walking through our documentation.
You can respond to that if you want, Justin. My point was somewhat orthogonal.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree. I guess what I'm a little bit worried about, and there's a problem that we're in, which is that Ambient and Sidecar is pretty different. I am worried though about really being confusing. Like if we have a totally different set of docs, like that, if we create sort of a Python 3K type situation where, you know, we end up with essentially a fork and then people are confused about which they should be using. Unfortunately, we actually are sort of in that Python 3000 situation, but yeah, I mean, I think we should, I just think it, yeah, I can argue for it either way. So I'm a little bit concerned about that though.
Yeah, I agree with everyone that what we have is not ideal and that I don't know what ideal is, but to play some advocate for why to keep it separate, the biggest concern I have is that we go and have Hello World and we say like, okay, you want to use Istio. Like, do you want Istio APIs, Gateway API? Do you want Ambient or Sidecar? Do you want, these things? Like, there's so many options. We used to have it. We got to 4 on the getting started when I was first joining like 5 years ago. We went back down to 0, and then we slowly crept back up. I think we're back to 4. Now you have to pick Helm or Istio Cuddle, and then Istio or Gateway API. So it gets very rough to have so many. I don't know. There's maybe no solution. Maybe there's some clever solution. I had thought about maybe having like a site level options of like, do you want advanced features to be visible? Yes or no? Which one do you want to show? Istio or Sidecar? And like we could default to one or the other. But that's probably also pretty hairy for its own set of reasons. So in my opinion, the easiest thing to do for this release is to have it how we have it now with like that own section. But I definitely don't think that's the best long term. And I would love to have, even outside of Ambient, more investment in our docs because I don't like them either.
By the way, in talking about this, I'm thinking for the Get Started guide, should we even offer 2 options? Do we want to promote one option versus the other for when people get started? I'm just trying to think. It could be too confusing if we show people both.
Oh, yeah, I would, in my opinion, just use the Gateway API because we're already targeting new users. And we don't really test the Istio APIs.
Okay, yeah, I'm in favor.
Honestly, we should. I don't think I had this in my doc that I was working on, but we might even consider saying that the Istio APIs are alpha.
Yeah, okay, I'll
I
submit
agree
a
with
PR
that.
for this because I do, like you said, I mean, 4 option, now we're down to 2, 1 is the best. So
yeah, so on the Ambient page, will there be just one option, just Istio Cuddle?
for Get Started at least, right? I mean, because there's no point for having people to try Istio API, especially we're putting this as the first tab.
Yeah, yeah. So for demo, I think it's fine. Then we can have another tab that's like more advanced ways to install Istio Cuddle Helm, and then even for the waypoints, like how you would do it manually rather than using the Istio Cuddle tooling. If that's not there right now, that's fine. But yeah, that makes sense. One thing I was also planning to add, I don't know if it already exists, actually, was a troubleshooting page. Costin, you putting your hand up, remind me of that because I'm like writing it in my mind when I have some free time, but I haven't got into writing on paper yet, but that will be useful. I've done a lot of troubleshooting the past few weeks, so I've learned a few tricks.
Yeah, when I said one option, I hope that's Helm, not Istio Cuddle installed. Do you mean we want the option to be Istio Cuddle?
No, I think for Get Started, Istio Cuddle is probably fine. The reason is, if you look at the Helm install, there's like 5 steps to install Istio. For Get Started, I think it's good to just ask user to use Istio Cuddle because it's so much easier.
But we are back to 2 options then. And it's much easier to get started in one step, but it's much more difficult to, move to production, to operate, to do anything useful, and then to move to Helm. I mean, it's 5 steps is far at startup is better than 20 steps when you have later on to move to Helm because you're not going to.
But the personas are different. That's the key.
Yeah.
Is that the getting started user is trying to, I just want to run this on kind and I want to see Sidecar this Istio. And then once that's done, I'm going to delete that cluster. Like that's the persona for a getting started guide. And in that case, you don't want to have to, okay, let me go figure out, like, create a YAML file, get my Helm value set. Like, you just want something to work with one command. And the shorter, and the more you can reduce the time to getting something up, the better.
Yeah.
Now, what you're talking about, Costin, I completely agree with you, is what's the next step? What happens after that? What happens when they actually kind of move this into the production? And in my mind, at least, I'm just one person, in my mind, that's a completely different persona. And our docs, I think, need to reflect the persona of the person reading them and following along with them. And so for things going through like L7 with Ambient, like docs going more in detail with that, I would honestly say that we should only put gateway API, at least until we can say virtual service is or the Istio APIs are above alpha. Like this is what I'm.
Yeah.
Ooh, we need to rethink our docs when it comes to the personas of the people going through experiencing them.
But there are plenty of projects in the world that have a small, curl shell script execute, that runs Helm, and I mean, you don't need to use Istio cut. You can have a small script for beginners that runs the 5 commands in a row if you need to, or the old curl insecure or whatever it was. It's just, we'll have to maintain Istio cut. We'll have some users who, because the personas are changing. I mean, it's not like, it's a completely different person who evaluates Istio and then a completely different person is going to use it in production or do in development. I mean, it's the same person eventually. I mean, you're not going to, it's so easy. Like people, Istio is so easy. Just run a command, everything is perfect. And then it's the same dude that is going to be later kind of cries that it's not working.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, well, whatever we do for the Kickstart guide, like when that guide goes to actually deploy to production, the simplified quick start scenario is not going to be what they need anyway, right? That's kind of the whole umbrella chart versus not. We could give you a Helm umbrella chart that's opinionated, but that's going to be wrong for your Argo deployment or whatever, right? Because it's very specific to you. So having the two guides makes sense. We have the simple opinionated getting started, and then there's the you need to do a real install. Here's how you can do it granularly. Like that makes sense to me. I think we have to do that. Otherwise, maybe we could do something where we for the Kickstart, we also have an umbrella chart in Helm later, but it's still going to have to be two different entry points because you're doing two different things. You're tire kicking locally or you're installing in production, and they're not going to have the same values or the same anything.
Yeah, I really wanted us to quick start to be quick. By the way, for reference, if you look at Cilium, if you look at Linkerd, they all have like one command to install. The last thing I want people to say is the Israel project doesn't know how to install, and quick start it needs 5 commands to install. That's not something we want people to experience when they only have 5 minutes on Istio.
We already have a reputation of being super complex. Like having
Right,
multiple steps
exactly.
only reinforces that, in my opinion.
Because we optimize for install instead of optimizing for operations, and that reflects in a lot of other things.
But it's the quick start custom, right? Like no matter what, like we have both options. We have things optimized for a one click, and we have things optimized for production. When we have 2 different pages for those. Those are not quite the same thing. And if we like to do something in production, need to do a lot of things, right? And we should better document that. We do a terrible job at how to operate Istio in production at scale. Like we don't do a good job at that. And it's not just a matter of Istio Cuddle or Helm. It's a lot more than that. And we should do that. Like I would love to have like walkthroughs of like, here's how you should set things up with Argo CD, for example, and a lot of other things beyond that as well, like all the operational things. In terms of what we put on the quick start, whether it's Helm or Istio Cuddle, it's, tomato, tomato, I think. I've talked to people that were like, oh, this project had their own CLI, I'm not using it. I've talked to other people that said this project uses Helm, I'm not using it. I've talked to someone else that said, oh, it's just a customized YAML, I'm not using it. Like, well, no one's going to be happy. But I think the requirement of, simple copy paste one command for a quick start is a nice property to have.
If the documentation is clear, do not use this in production ever, then probably it's okay. But I've seen people use Istio Cuddle in production and believe that Istio Cuddle is, since they see the quick start, they believe the quick start also applies if I want to use it for production, because it's never disclaims that this quick start is just for kind and for, I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that use Istio Cuddle in production, and I think they're doing it in perfectly reasonable ways. I don't mean this as a dig, but the Google Service Mesh uses Istio Cuddle for all their installs as well. Like it's used in production with success. Like I'm not saying that it's a bad product. I'm saying that Istio Cuddle is fine. Like is it the way I would do it if I was operating my own production cluster? No. But is it terrible and you should never ever do it? I don't think so either.
So then the problem is, I mean, I completely, I'm not, it's not that I completely agree with you that we had a lot of problems with Istio cattle and all the different install methods, and that's why, now it's G Cloud Fleet enable or slightly different. My concern is that we perpetuate the two install methods, Istio cattle and Helm, and getting started implies that you're starting on something and you evolve, not getting started and stopped at the same time. I mean, get started and then when you want to move forward, go to something. In any case, I mean, it's not worse than what we have today, but we need to understand that pretending it's super easy to use when in reality it's hard doesn't help anyone, because it's only making things worse when you want to move to the next step and you get stuck with Istio cattle, because I don't think you can move from Istio cattle to Helm easily.
All right. Looks like, Keith, we already kind of cover your next topic already.
A little bit. I can. It's a slightly different doc than the 122 docs plan. This last topic is about 123. I mentioned this in the combined working group call, but just for folks who maybe only attend the ambient call, I want us to start thinking about big themes and things for Istio 123. Even while we're in the middle of wrapping up 122, it's a good time to see what didn't make it, what still needs to be done, things like that. During this conversation, I started pulling in some bullet points in our doc improvements in what I think needs to be done for to tackle our docs. There's also a section specifically for ambient related work. For example, I put it in the agenda like ALTC policy status. That definitely needs to be done in 123, I think. There are a couple other things that are slipping my mind at the moment. I don't know if like what our plan is for multi-cluster, multi-network, things like that. I'm sure most folks like me are just trying to get with 122 and get ambient launched before tackling some of the huge stuff. But for folks who have ideas or opinions for what we need to tackle in 1.23, I think it might be a good idea to get a release planning doc out there. So I made one and started. I'm going to start adding stuff to it. It's in the Istio drive, so everybody should have access. If you run into issues with it, let me know. And start adding things there. And hopefully when we get finished with the 122 release, we can maybe start here to see what we want to tackle for 123.
Yeah, that's great. And then for your 122 doc, I think ideally I would love to see people sign up to help. We all express different opinions on docs, so nothing would get done if we don't have people signing up. So I'm already scrubbed some of the old content. I'll probably help write the ambient blog. So if anybody have bandwidth to help doc, particularly folks wants to have like production doc for Helm, production doc for Argo, definitely do sign up and help. It would be super appreciated.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I'm a big fan of what you just said, Lynn, as far as getting people to sign up for things. Like, we're 2 weeks out, and so if you feel strongly about something getting done, we're at the time frame where you probably need to sign up to do it yourself, or directly ask somebody to do it and put their name on it. Anything else, I think, is at risk of not landing. So I'm going to sign up for a couple. Like you mentioned, I've got a blog post I'm going to work with Whitney on and get Whitney writing that post on all these channels. There's also stuff missing from this docs plan, so feel free to add other bullet points, other checkboxes as well. Just want to plus 100 what you just said, Lynn.
What's the best way to collaborate? Do you think this doc here or through a Slack channel, or any thoughts on that?
I think this doc would be great because Keith already started, so it's probably very easy to get this. You just sign up for things. I think we should probably add maybe the architecture doc too. because that needs to be updated for sure, and the layer 7 user guide. So if people have bandwidth, I'll sign up if I have more bandwidth too. And I can add production install guide.
And to your point, Justin, I think Slack is the right place to collaborate on, like, if you've got opinions on these things,
Yeah.
like at the owner in Slack. I think that's a great way to drive consensus.
All right, we are out of time. I do want to remind people tomorrow we have a community meeting, which I sent to the announcement channel. So you guys all know we have this person. I'm actually not sure if he's on the meeting here, but Sako, he's been exploring Ambient. It's still sidecar user. So I think it's very important for folks working on Ambient to hear his perspective, help us improve and move the project along. So I just want to invite you guys join if you have time, and I may call you guys to share what you are working on or anything excites you related to 1.22 release.
Yeah. Thank you for setting that up, Lynn.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for the calendar permission issue sorted out. Should we wrap this up? Anything last minute from anybody?
No.
All we good? All right. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And so.